The problem began, as most administrative catastrophes do, with a checkbox. Specifically, the checkbox on Form 7 Alpha that asked, does the applicant species possess a centralized military review board capable of vetting candidates? Someone in the VRYNN Shock Corps Admissions Department had checked yes for a species that barely had centralized garbage collection. That someone was now being transferred to inventory management on a mining station at the ass end of the Kepler Traverse, but this knowledge did little to help drill instructor Kethril, who was currently staring at the human female standing in his formation line. She was smiling. Kethril had broken recruits from 47 species across 3 galactic arms. He'd seen Desik warriors creatures with exoskeletons thick enough to stop small arms fire weep during his opening remarks. He'd watched Antari packs, predators who hunted in neural link groups, fracture into whimpering individuals by day 3. His methods were not gentle. His methods were not designed to be gentle. The VRYNN didn't produce soldiers. They produced weapons that happened to be alive, and Kethril was the forge that burned away everything weak. The human was still smiling. Recruitment error. Kethril had said when the human first shambled into the staging area, wearing the standard issue grade training armor that somehow looked cheaper on her frame. This one goes back. Can't. His second, a lean VRYNN named Sethker, had pulled up the holochart with visible discomfort. Her homeworld submitted a formal application to the Terran Colonial Authority. It's technically a recognized government now. Treaty of Advancement protocols apply. Then reject her on physical grounds. Look at her. She's barely 2 meters. Height discrimination lawsuits from the Phoenix Collective 3 cycles ago. Sir, we lost badly. Can't use size metrics anymore. Kethril had hissed through his breathing slits. Does she even understand what this program is? Her entrance scores were acceptable. Language processing, spatial reasoning, tactical scenario modeling, all within parameters. Her entrance scores were acceptable because we designed them for a species that consider intellectual pursuits a survival trait. These humans fight with ballistic weapons and chemical explosives. They're barely post-industrial. Sethker had said nothing, which was his way of agreeing without technically insubordinating. Now, Kethril stood before the formation line, 23 recruits from 14 species, and one human who seemed to think this was some kind of cultural exchange program. The opening ceremony was theater, but it was calculated theater. The baton of command was carved from compressed quartz harvested from VRYNN Prime's high-pressure crust. It was harder than most armor. It had never, in 400 cycles of Academy tradition, failed to make its point. You believe you are soldiers, Kethril announced, his voice carrying across the parade ground without amplification. The VRYNN had evolved vocal sacs specifically for projecting authority across hunting grounds. You are mistaken. You are raw material. Soft, undisciplined, weak. He began to walk down the line, and 22 recruits locked their bodies into rigid attention. The human sort of straightened up, which was apparently her interpretation of military bearing. I will remake you, Kethril continued. I will strip away the weakness your homeworld permitted, your comfort, your dignity, your illusion that you matter as individuals. He stopped in front of the Thesic recruit whose carapace was already showing stress fractures from sheer nervous tension. Good. Fear was the first lesson. He struck the Thesic's chest plate with a baton, not enough to injure, but enough to make the sound crack across the ground like thunder. The recruit's breathing spiracles clamped shut in automatic terror response. Kethril moved down the line. A Voss pack member. Strike. A Phoenix navigator. Strike. Each impact perfectly calibrated. Enough force to demonstrate their vulnerability, not enough to cause actual harm. The sound was the point, the promise of what that sound represented. He reached the human. She was watching him with what appeared to be polite interest. Kethril raised the baton and brought it down across her shoulder pauldron with every gram of force his augmented musculature could generate. The sound was different this time, higher-pitched, sharp. The baton shattered. Pieces of compressed quartz scattered across the parade ground like shrapnel. Kethril stood there, holding the remaining 30 centimeters of sacred ceremonial tradition, staring at the jagged edge where 400 cycles of unbroken legacy had just ended. The human looked down at her shoulder, where not even a scuff mark appeared on the standard polymer composite armor. She looked at the broken baton. She looked back up at Kethril with an expression of genuine confusion. "Oh," she said, "are we doing the trust-building exercises already? I thought those usually came later in training. Do you want me to break something on you now, or is this more of a turn-based thing?" 22 recruits had stopped breathing. Sethker had taken 3 steps backward without realizing it. Somewhere in the administrative tower, someone was probably already updating transfer orders. Kethril found his voice, which had temporarily relocated to somewhere near his lower intestine. "What? What did you say?" "The reciprocal conditioning, where you demonstrate you can take what you dish out, so we trust the training won't actually injure us." The human tilted her head. "My instructor back home used to have us hit him in the stomach. Well, after we did like 300 sit-ups. Is that the kind of thing you're going for, or is this more symbolic?" 300, Kethril stopped. "Start it over. You think this is symbolic? I mean, the stick was pretty, but it shattered. So," she gestured at the scattered quartz. "Symbolic, right? First day theatrics? I've seen orientation hazing before. One time at wilderness camp. They made us eat bugs, and it turned out the bugs were chocolate. Is this like that?" Sethker made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been his career dying. Kethril looked at the broken baton in his hand. He looked at the human, who was now glancing around like she was worried she'd misread social cues. He looked at the remaining 22 recruits, who were watching this interaction with the kind of attention prey animals reserve for predator negotiations. "Dismissed," Kethril said, his voice flat. "All of you, except you." He pointed at the human. "You stay." The formation scattered like startled fish. Sethker hesitated, then wisely decided that whatever was about to happen, he wanted no official record of having witnessed it. The human waited, still at her approximation of attention. "What's your name?" Kethril asked, which was against protocol. Names were earned after the first culling. But protocol had already taken a running leap off a cliff. "Recruit 447, sir. But back home, people call me Mac." "Mac." Short for Mackenzie. But nobody uses that except my mom when I'm in trouble. Kethril stared at her. "Am I in trouble?" Mac asked. "Because I can pay for the stick thing." "Baton." "Sorry, Baton. The Baton thing." "No," Kethril said slowly. "No, you're not in trouble. Not yet, anyway. But somebody was. Possibly an entire species. Possibly Kethril himself, for not immediately recognizing that the galaxy's latest applicant species might have fundamentally different definitions of the word training. Max smiled again, apparently relieved. Kethril turned and walked toward the command tower, his mind already racing through the implications. Behind him, he heard Mac call out, "So, when does the real stuff start?" He didn't answer. He was too busy calculating how badly this was going to get medical officer Thrain had seen combat injuries that turned his digestive tract inside out. He'd rebuilt VRYNN soldiers from component parts after they'd been scattered across 3 square kilometers of hostile terrain. He'd cataloged 17 different ways a Thesic could hemorrhage internally without external signs. None of that prepared him for the datasheet Kethril dropped on his examination table. "You're joking," Thrain said, reading the bone density figures for the 3rd time. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Thrain glanced up. Kethril looked like he'd aged 10 cycles in 3 hours. "These numbers can't be right. This says her skeletal structure has the compressive strength of reinforced ceramic composite. That's the standard human range, apparently. She's slightly below average for her species." Below average. Thrain set down the datapad. Below average. Her bones are rated for impact forces that would liquefy a VRYNN, and she's below average. Keep reading. Thrain scrolled down. Stopped. Scroll back up to verify. He hadn't misread. Her muscle fiber density. This is a typo. You accidentally added a decimal point. No decimal point. Then your scanner malfunctioned. 3 different scanners. 2 different facilities. Chief Tactical Instructor Voren witnessed the second set of tests. Would you like to tell him his equipment is broken? Thrain wisely chose not to answer that. Vorin had beaten someone unconscious with their own limb once, which seemed excessive until you learned the limb in question had been cybernetic and still attached at the time. Where is she now? Environmental Conditioning Chamber 3. Vorin wanted to run temperature tolerance trials. Without supervision? Vorin supervising. Kethral's voice had gone flat again, which Thrain had learned meant something had gone wrong in ways that defied proper emotional response. You should probably come watch. The observation deck overlooked a chamber designed to simulate 40 different hostile environments. Currently, it was set to Forge protocol. 48 degrees standard, 70% humidity. 3 VRYNN could survive maybe 20 minutes in there before heat exhaustion became heat stroke, became organ failure. It was used for final week evaluations, and even then, only for the elite candidates who'd proven they could regulate their core temperature through sheer mental discipline. Mac had been in there for 90 minutes. She was doing push-ups. How many has she done? Thrain asked. Vorin didn't look away from the observation window. The tactical instructor was a wall of augmented muscle and scar tissue, his crest feathers cropped in the style of career combatants who'd seen too much action to care about decoration. I stopped counting at 300. 300 push-ups in 48-degree heat. She asked if we had any weights. Said this felt like a sauna back home, and people usually just sit still in those. Thrain watched Mac complete another repetition, her form annoyingly perfect. Her homeworld's environmental data, do we have that? Kethral pulled it up on the holographic display. Surface temperature range, minus 40 to plus 55 degrees standard. She's from a temperate zone that fluctuates between minus 10 and plus 35. Seasonally, that's not possible. That range will require constant metabolic adjustment. The caloric intake alone. 12,000 calories daily for an active adult human. Kethral interrupted. I checked. They eat multiple times per day. That's more than a Thesic warrior. Thesic warriors are half again her size. Thrain pulled up Mac's admission file, scanning to the biological overview he'd skimmed before. He'd assumed the data was compressed or summarized. Now he read it carefully, his discomfort growing with each line. It says here they're persistence predators, Thrain said slowly. Correct. Meaning they hunt prey to exhaustion over extended periods, sometimes days. Their cardiovascular efficiency is designed for sustained output, not burst performance. Vorin finally spoke, his voice carrying the tone of someone who'd reached an uncomfortable conclusion. Pull up the recruit integration statistics. Filter by species washout rates during basic conditioning. Kethral did. The numbers appeared. Thesic, 40% attrition. Voss, 37%. Phoenix, 52%. The list went on, species after species, all showing significant dropout during the first training phase. Now show me human recreational athletic standards, Vorin said. Kethral hesitated, then complied. A new data set appeared, something called a marathon, where humans ran 42 kilometers for entertainment. Another activity called triathlon that combines swimming, cycling, and running over distances that would constitute a military operation for most species. A discipline called ultramarathon that apparently involved running for 24 hours straight. These are elite athletes. Thrain asked. No, Kethral said quietly. These are amateurs. People do this for fun, for charity fundraising. The elite ones do significantly more. In the chamber below, Mac finished her push-ups and moved to a pull-up bar. She knocked out 15 without apparent strain, then dropped down and started jogging in place. Tell me about human pain tolerance, Vorin said. Thrain pulled up the neurological data, his hands moving mechanically now. He'd entered the phase of catastrophic revelation, where each new piece of information just added to the pile. Their pain response is strange. They register injury but can functionally ignore the signals through conscious effort. Something they call adrenaline floods their system during stress and temporarily suppresses. I know what adrenaline is, Vorin interrupted. Most species have some version. How much can they suppress? There are documented cases of humans continuing to fight with lethal injuries. One file mentions a soldier who engaged hostiles for 40 minutes with a projectile through his chest cavity. 40 minutes. His squad assumed he was dead. He assumed he was fine. Voren turned away from the window. Bring her up. I want to ask her some questions. 5 minutes later, Max stood in the observation deck, slightly sweaty but otherwise showing no signs of distress. She'd toweled off and looked, if anything, energized. How are you feeling? Voren asked, his tone carefully neutral. Good. That was a great warm-up. I was worried I'd get out of shape here, but if you've got that sauna chamber, I can definitely maintain my cardio base. Warm up, Voren repeated. Yeah, I usually do about an hour of mixed cardio before strength training, but I can adjust to whatever the program requires. Thrain decided to risk it. What does strength training mean in human terms? Oh, weights, resistance work, core conditioning. I was lifting pretty regularly before shipping out. Nothing crazy, just enough to keep my certification current. Certification for what? Wilderness Emergency Response. I volunteer with search and rescue back home. You have to maintain certain fitness standards to rappel with a loaded pack or carry an injured person over rough terrain. Kethril and Voren exchanged looks. Thrain pressed on. Define loaded pack. About 30 kilos? Plus rope, medical gear, water, food. Maybe 40 kilos total? For like 8 to 12 hours of hiking, depending on the call-out. 40 kilograms. For 12 hours. Well, you rotate off every few days. Can't do it continuously, or you burn out. Max smiled like she'd said something reasonable. Why? Is that different from standard training here? Nobody answered. Thrain was busy calculating whether Mac could, in theory, carry every other recruit in her cohort simultaneously. The math said yes with room for equipment. Tell me about boot camp. Voren said finally. Which service? I didn't enlist, but my cousin did Marines. She said it was tough but manageable. Describe tough. Lots of running with gear, obstacle courses, pugil stick fighting, gas chamber exposure, sleep deprivation, constant physical and mental stress for about 3 months. They're trying to break you down and rebuild you as a unit, right? Standard stuff. Standard stuff. Thrain felt something inside him give up. The gas chamber, Kethril said faintly. They expose you to toxins deliberately? To CS gas. It's like really intense pepper spray in vapor form. Burns your lungs and skin, makes you cry and cough. You have to go in with a mask, then take it off and recite your ID number before they let you out. Builds confidence in your equipment and proves you can function under chemical exposure. And this is for baseline soldiers. Yeah, everyone does it. Voren walked to a window and stared out at the training grounds where 22 other recruits were currently struggling through standard calisthenics. What we're doing here, he said carefully, how would you rate it compared to your cousin's experience? Mac considered this. I mean, day one is usually pretty easy anywhere. Get oriented, meet people, light activity. I'm sure it'll ramp up. Right, Voren said. Ramp up. When do we start the hard stuff? Thrain watched Kethril's crest feathers flatten, completely against his skull, which was a VRYNN equivalent of a stress-induced shutdown. Voren just kept staring out the window. Soon, Voren said. Very soon. After Mac left, the 3 instructors stood in silence. We're going to fail her, right? Thrain finally asked. Find some technicality? Can't, Kethril said. Her government has treaty protection. If we fail her without cause, it's a diplomatic incident. Then we pass her quickly and quietly. And what happens, Voren said, still staring out the grounds, when other humans apply? When they find out one of their below-average civilians breeze through the galaxy's premier military conditioning program. Nobody had an answer for that. Commandant Zres had held her position for 22 cycles, which made her the longest-serving academy commander in VRYNN history. She'd built her reputation on an unwavering principle. The shock core broke everyone eventually. The timid broke early. The proud broke later. The truly exceptional broke last, but they all broke, because breaking was the point. You couldn't rebuild someone into something harder unless you first shattered what they'd been. She was beginning to suspect humans didn't shatter. They dented, apparently, then popped back into shape like some kind of demented self-healing material. "Run that past me again," Zres said, massaging the ridge above her primary eyes. Slowly, around the conference table sat the Academy's senior staff, Kethril, Vorin, Thrain, and 3 department heads who'd been called in for what was rapidly becoming a crisis management session. Outside the tower windows, the twin suns cast long shadows across the training grounds. Evening formation would begin in an hour. Mac would be there, probably still confused about why everyone was treating basic physical conditioning like some kind of advanced torture technique. "The human has been sharing fitness advice with her cohort," Vorin said, his voice admirably steady considering the implications. "She thinks she's helping. And the results? 2 Fennecs in medical with severe muscle strain. 1 Voss Pack member with a stress fracture. The Thesic developed a respiratory crisis after attempting what the human called a light jog. How light? 5 kilometers. In 14 minutes. Zres's secondary eyelids closed involuntarily. "That's faster than our courier drones." The human said she was taking it easy because she didn't want to show off on her first week. Department head Solvek, who oversaw strategic communications, cleared his throat. "With respect, Commandant, the immediate medical issues are manageable. The political situation is 3 client species across 6 sectors. Our reputation is built on a singular premise. We provide the most rigorous, effective combat conditioning in known space. I'm aware of our marketing materials. Solvek. Then you're aware that our entire economic model collapses if word spreads that a human species we'd never heard of until 18 months ago finds our elite program easier than her civilian fitness routine." Zres leaned back in her chair, the servos whining softly. "We contain the information." "How?" Solvek gestured at the holographic display, where communication logs scrolled past in real time. "She's already mentioned it in 3 video calls to her family. Used phrases like, 'not as hard as I expected,' and kind of like summer camp with more push-ups. Those calls route through civilian networks. They're not classified. Anyone monitoring human communication channels now has confirmation that our program is, and I quote, 'pretty chill so far.'" "Pretty chill," Zres repeated, the word sitting in her mouth like poison. Department head Tarvik, who ran tactical doctrine, spoke up. "There's another issue. The other recruits are starting to ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "Specifically, if the human can do this easily, what does that say about the species who can't? We've spent decades convincing client governments that our program produces elite soldiers. But Mac is civilian. Volunteer search and rescue. No formal military training. If she's representative of baseline human capability." Tarvik spread his hands. "Then every species currently paying us is overpaying. Significantly. She might be an outlier," Thrain offered, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Exceptional even by human standards. I ran a statistical analysis of human athletic performance metrics," Solvek said, pulling up a new dataset. "Based on their global population of 8 billion and documented competition results, Mac ranks approximately in the 60th percentile for her age and gender category in most physical categories. 60th percentile means 40% of human females her age could perform at her level or better. 64% of human males. And that's just Earth's civilian population, not accounting for their actual military forces." The room went quiet. Somewhere in the building, someone was teaching recruits how to disassemble plasma rifles. Someone else was explaining tactical doctrine for urban combat. All of it suddenly felt very fragile. Zres turned to Kethril. "Your professional assessment. Can we make the program harder? Add elements that would challenge her without killing the other recruits." Kethril's crest feathers rippled with dark amusement. "Based on what, Commandant? We designed this curriculum to push species to their absolute limits. Mac thinks it's recreational. If we increase intensity to challenge her, we won't just fail the other recruits, we'll hospitalize them, possibly kill them. What about specialized training? Something that plays other species' strengths." "Like what?" "Espionage training requires subtlety humans apparently evolved as pursuit predators. which means they're patient enough to track prey for days without breaking focus. Technical skills? Their spatial reasoning and pattern recognition evolved for throwing projectiles at moving targets while running. They're tool users from a competitive environment. I've reviewed their military history. They've been killing each other with progressively more efficient technology for 10,000 years. Vorn added, their planet has multiple climate zones, so they're environmentally adaptable. They have pursuit endurance, so they can outlast most species in sustained operations. Their pain tolerance means they can fight through injuries that would incapacitate others. And their social structure, they form intense loyalty bonds within small units, which is literally what we're trying to train into our recruits artificially. So what you're telling me, Zres said slowly, is that humans accidentally evolved every single trait we spend 8 months trying to artificially instill in soldiers from species that didn't. Not accidentally, Thrain corrected. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. They developed these traits because the ones who didn't all died. It's called natural selection, and their homeworld apparently ran the process at maximum difficulty. Solvek pulled up another file. I've been reviewing Earth's ecological data. Atmospheric oxygen content is 21% higher than most habitable worlds. Gravity is 1.1 standard. Native predators include ambush hunters with neurotoxic venom, pack predators with pursuit speeds exceeding 80 kilometers per hour, and something called a hippo that kills more humans annually than any other large animal despite being herbivorous. Why? Zres asked. Territorial aggression and jaw strength sufficient to bite a human in half. And humans just live there with these things. They turn most of the predators into entertainment attractions. Something called zoos, where they pay currency to observe the animals that use to hunt them. Zres felt a headache forming behind her ocular ridge. Recommendations. Someone give me an actionable recommendation. Tarvik spoke first. We could expel her, claim the program isn't suitable for her needs. Which admits she doesn't need it, Solvek countered. Every intelligence agency in 6 sectors will draw the correct conclusion that human baseline exceeds VRYN and elite. Our client contracts collapse inside a fiscal quarter. We could fail her on technical grounds, Vorn suggested. Create a test she can't pass. Like what? Kethral's voice dripped skepticism. I watched her field strip a plasma rifle in 4 minutes on her first attempt. She said the mechanics reminded her of something called an AR-15 from her homeworld. Apparently, humans have recreational weapons. They hunt animals for sport, with projectile weapons, for entertainment. Zres stood, pacing to the window. Below, she could see the evening formation gathering. Max stood in line, chatting with a Thezic, who seemed to be asking her something, probably for more fitness advice. The Thezic would be in medical by tomorrow, because when the other species see what humans consider normal conditioning, our program won't look weak by comparison. It'll look appropriately scaled for everyone who isn't a death world persistence predator. We're not failing to challenge her. We're successfully training species who didn't evolve in a planetary hellscape. Voron's crest feathers lifted slightly. That could work. We make it clear that human standards are outlier status, an evolutionary quirk, not a military advantage. Zres warmed to the idea as she spoke. We emphasize that our program produces equivalent results through superior technique and discipline, without requiring species to have survived millions of years of attempted extinction. And if the demonstration goes poorly, Thrain asked, how could it go poorly? She'll do some push-ups and running. Maybe demonstrate human equipment standards. It'll be educational. Kethral and Vorn exchanged looks that suggested they'd learn to never ask that question. I'll make the arrangements, Solvek said, already pulling up scheduling protocols. When should we hold it? Tomorrow, before this spreads further. Tomorrow? Commandant, we need time to prepare proper observation safety protocols. Tomorrow, Zres repeated, and someone brief Mac. Tell her we want her to demonstrate a typical human training session. Nothing extreme, just her normal routine. Her normal routine put 4 recruits in medical, Vorn pointed out. Then tell her to keep it light. After the meeting dispersed, Zres stood alone at the window, watching Mac laugh at something one of the Phoenix recruits had said. The human had no idea she'd just triggered an economic crisis. She thought she was making friends, being helpful, participating in some grand cultural exchange. Zres had survived 22 cycles in command by being smarter than her problems. She had a sinking feeling that humans were a different category of problem entirely. The amphitheater had been built to accommodate 2,000 spectators during graduation ceremonies, when proud families watched their offspring receive commissions into various military forces across the sector. Today it held representatives from 18 client species governments, 47 military attachés, 12 financial analysts, and a disturbing number of intelligence operatives who thought they were being discreet. They were not here for graduation. Commandant Zres stood at the podium, her dress uniform pristine, her bearing projecting the confidence of someone who absolutely had the situation under control and was not all watching her career teeter on the edge of a cliff. Behind her, the training ground had been converted into a demonstration space. Equipment stations dotted the field, resistance apparatus, cardiovascular machinery, environmental chambers, and a truly alarming amount of medical staff positioned at strategic intervals. Max stood off to the side, wearing standard PT gear and looking confused about why there were so many people with recording devices. "Honored guests," Zres began, her voice amplified across the amphitheater. The VRYNN Shock Corps has built its reputation on a simple principle: effective training produces effective soldiers, regardless of species origin. Today we showcase an educational demonstration of comparative conditioning methodologies. She paused, letting the murmur settle. Half the audience thought they were about to witness the Academy's humiliation. The other half thought they were about to see a human fail spectacularly at something. Both groups were about to be disappointed, though Zres was counting on the disappointment taking specific forms. Our volunteer today is Recruitment, representing Earth's civilian emergency response sector. She'll demonstrate standard human conditioning protocols used in non-military applications. This will illustrate how different evolutionary backgrounds produce different baseline capabilities, and why the Shock Corps' universal training methodology remains the optimal solution for integrated multi-species operations. Polite applause. Several of the Thesic delegates were already taking notes. Good. Let them write down everything they were about to see, because they'd never believe the reports otherwise. Zres gestured to Mac, who jogged to the center of the field with the easy gait of someone who'd been told this was going to be fun and educational, and hadn't detected any of the existential dread permeating the staff. "Recruitment," Zres said, "please demonstrate a standard warm-up routine from your civilian background." "Just a warm-up?" Mac called back. "Not like a full session? Let's start with the warm-up." "Okay, but just so you know, this is going to be pretty boring. It's just basic mobility work." Basic mobility work, as it turned out, involved Mac dropping into a series of movements that made several Phoenix representatives physically recoil. She flowed through something called dynamic stretching lunges that covered 3 meters per step, torso rotations that would have snapped a VRNN spinal column, and arm circles that demonstrated a shoulder socket range of motion that Thrain, watching from the medical station, immediately flagged as anatomically suspicious. "This is just to get blood flowing," Mac explained, her breathing completely normal. "Wake up the muscles. Check for any tweaks or tightness. Usually takes about 10 minutes. She'd been going for 2 minutes. Zres checked the chronometer, then checked the audience. A Voss military consultant was frantically typing into a data pad. 3 Thesic were having a whispered argument. This was already getting away from her. "Excellent," Zres interrupted. "Now, perhaps you could demonstrate basic cardiovascular conditioning." "Sure. Do you want distance or interval work?" "Whatever you consider standard." Mac moved to the track that circled the demonstration area. "I'll just do a tempo run. Nothing crazy. Maybe 5 kilometers at conversational pace." Conversational pace. Zres had reviewed the metrics. She knew it was coming. The audience did not. Mac started running. The first lap took 90 seconds. The second lap took 90 seconds. The third lap took 90 seconds. Her pace didn't vary. Her breathing remained controlled. And she was moving fast enough that several species would have classified it as sprinting. By the 5th lap, the audience had gone quiet. By the 10th lap, someone in the Phoenix delegation said something that the translator rendered as, "Oh, ancestors preserve us." Mac finished 5 kilometers in just under 14 minutes, then jogged back to the center position. "Good?" she asked, barely winded. "Fine," Zres managed. "Now, perhaps strength conditioning? Body weight or resistance?" Body weight. They discussed this. Controlled demonstrations. Nothing that would require equipment calibration, or could be dismissed as mechanical advantage. Mac dropped down and began doing push-ups. Standard form, full extension, controlled tempo. She counted out loud, which was a mistake, because it meant everyone in the amphitheater could hear her reach 50, then 100, then 150, without her voice showing any strain whatsoever. At 200, she paused. "Should I keep going? I usually do these in sets of 50 with different hand positions, but I can just keep the same grip if you want." 200 is sufficient, Zres said, her voice tight. "Cool. Pull-ups next." There was a bar set up at regulation height. Mac jumped, caught it, and proceeded to perform pull-ups with a form so precise that Vorin, watching from the instructor section, made a note to use a recording in future technique classes. She did 40 before Zres stopped her. "Thank you, Recruit Mac. Now, regarding mental conditioning, perhaps you could describe human stress inoculation protocols." This was the pivot point, the moment where Zres could reframe everything they'd seen as physical quirks that still require the shock core psychological conditioning expertise to transform into actual combat effectiveness. Mac brightened. "Oh, definitely. So back home, a lot of emergency response training focuses on maintaining performance under stress. Like, you have to be able to function when you're exhausted, scared, in pain, or dealing with sensory overload. And how is this trained? Depends on the program. Some places do sleep deprivation combined with physical stress, keep you awake for 36 to 48 hours while running scenarios. Others use environmental stressors like cold water immersion or heat exposure. My wilderness medicine instructor used to make us treat fake casualties while he set off flashbangs and screamed at us. A Thesic delegate stood up. "Excuse me, flashbangs?" Explosive devices that create loud noise and bright light to simulate combat conditions? They're disorienting if you're not expecting them. You train civilians with explosive devices? I mean, they're non-lethal, usually. There was that one incident in Ohio, but that was an equipment malfunction. Zres decided not to ask about Ohio. And pain tolerance training? That's usually more about learning your limits and understanding how to work through discomfort. Like, in winter survival courses, you practice building shelters and starting fires with wet wood when your hands are numb from cold. It's not about ignoring pain, it's about staying functional despite it. And this is required for civilian emergency response. If you want to certify in mountain rescue or swiftwater operations, yeah, people don't usually have emergencies in nice weather. A financial analyst from the Ontari Collective raised a tentacle. Clarification requests. These training protocols you described, are they optional enrichment programs or mandatory education? Optional, mostly. Well, mandatory if you want specific jobs. Most people just do regular school, maybe play some sports. Define regular school. Academic subjects? Math, science, literature. Plus physical education, usually running, team sports, basic fitness activities. Mandatory physical education? Yeah, pretty much everywhere from age 5 to 18. Keeps kids healthy. The analyst was typing furiously. Zres could see the calculations forming. If this was baseline human childhood education, what did their actual military forces look like? She needed to regain control. Perhaps a final demonstration, Zres announced. Something that showcases human environmental adaptation. They'd set up a simulation chamber for this mild compared to actual hostile environments, but impressive for demonstration purposes. Partial atmospheric pressure, elevated carbon dioxide, temperature variance. It was rated for a 5-minute exposure maximum for most species. Max stepped inside and they sealed the door. Standard scenario simulation. Zres explained to the audience. Reduced oxygen equivalent to high-altitude conditions. Increased CO2. Temperature fluctuation between 5 and 30 degrees standard. We'll run a brief. Hey, Mac's voice came through the comm system. Is this supposed to simulate altitude? Because this feels like maybe 3,000 meters equivalent. I've hiked higher than this without supplemental oxygen. Zres checked the readings. Mac's heart rate had barely elevated. Her breathing was slightly faster, but still controlled. The temperature shifts that should have been inducing thermal stress responses weren't registering at all. How long should I stay in here? Mac asked, because I can go for a while if you need me to. One time I did a winter camping trip where the temperature dropped to -20 overnight, and that was actually pretty uncomfortable. So this is honestly pretty pleasant. Zres turned off the microphone, looked at Voren. Get her out? We've only been running for 2 minutes. Get her out. They terminated the scenario. Mac emerged looking slightly disappointed that it had been so brief. Was that okay? I feel like I could have shown more, but if that's the time limit. The amphitheater was silent. Not the good kind of silent where audiences were impressed. The bad kind where financial projections were being recalculated in real time and military doctrine was being questioned and trade agreements were being mentally reviewed for exit clauses. A Thesic general stood. Commandant Zres, with all due respect, if this is baseline human capability, what exactly have we been paying for? Zres had prepared for this. General, what you've witnessed is a result of millions of years of evolution in a high-gravity, variable climate, oxygen-rich environment with significant predation pressure. Earth is classified as a Type 4 death world. Humans didn't develop these capabilities through training. They developed them through survival necessity. What the shock core provides is the ability to produce similar operational effectiveness in species that didn't require 4 million years of extinction-level evolutionary pressure. So you're saying your training is obsolete. I'm saying our training is accessible. You can send us recruits who evolved in low-pressure atmospheres, stable climates, and peaceful ecosystems, and we'll return soldiers who can function in hostile environments. The alternative is waiting several million years for your species to adapt naturally. Now, deeply understand script and write visual prompts to generate images for each important scene of script one by one separately. I want a full detail prompt for each important scene that fits the script. I want 10 images that covers a whole story in sequence. Include visual specifics like lighting, setting, clothing details, and facial details. Note that maintain consistency in all prompts across images by adhering to character traits like age, hairstyle, and attire. Specify if the style is realistic, cartoony, etc., with background elements that match the scene's tone.